Puppies. You bring that puppy home and you think this little cuddly bundle is going to be no trouble at all. But what you're going to end up with is a little monster who charges around the place, who nips, who flies around the place, toilets all over the place. Very likely you're going to wonder what has hit you. So what we're going to do here is to look at what I call puppy parenting. That is the whole things really you need to cover in order to set the puppy off in the right direction. And you'll find that training things like sit, come very low down the list of priorities. The first is to think before you bring the puppy home, that little puppy's never been away from his mother, his siblings. So it's a good idea to give the breeder something that smells of his little family, or else has something that you can take home with you so that he doesn't feel too lonely. Now I'm going to say he for the puppy, but of course it could equally well be she. Right, so we're going to look through things in this way. The first is looking at why the aspect needs to be covered, and then very briefly at how we cover it. But this is fairly brief because a lot of this would be fairly well specific to the puppy itself. So to go into more depth, it would be more sensible to have a one-to-one with me. Okay, so the first thing we do is looking at what they call socialization. Well, a lot of people think to socialize their puppy, they're going to take it out, make it meet as many things as possible, people and everything, regardless of whether the puppy is frightened or not. Well, puppy socialization actually means something different, really. It means habituating and just getting used to the real world. And that includes people of all kinds, other dogs, but it needs to do this, because if you don't get this done now very early, and unfortunately it's best to be start doing this well before the injections and the dog's allowed out. If you don't do that, then it ends in lots of future problems. I would say that a lot of my clients wouldn't have needed me at all had their puppy started off right. So the why is so that the dog gets confident and happy in the real world with different people. The how, well, the main thing about the how is to never push the puppy over his comfort threshold. So keep a distance from these things and build it up gradually. Now that is only very vague. We'd go into a lot more detail if it was specifically with your puppy exactly how to do it. But the thing not to do is to push him into scary situations. The next thing is you've got a little puppy who is going to be toileting all over the place most likely, and who is going to use his teeth because he's going to be teething and he's going to be exploring. He hasn't got hands like we have, so he's going to be doing it with his mouth. So the first thing is to start small, as we would with a baby. We're not going to give a toddler or crawler run of the house to fall down the stairs and so on. We start small. So how I do this is to start with a pen, not a crate. A pen doesn't have a lid, so it's not so bad. But so it keeps the puppy in one area, especially when you're not about, so that then you get much more control over things like toilet training, and it means you can put all his good stuff in there and make him really love it. And it also helps various other things, because gradually you're going to have to get him used to being left alone, which we'll talk about in a minute. So if he's never been alone, to me, the very, very worst thing you can do is say, well, look, he's going to have to cry it out over the night. Do it gradually. If he gets used to staying in a pen where he can't follow you everywhere, and you make the pen a nice place. If he shows any signs of being distressed, I have found it's a lot better to actually let the dog be in your bedroom with you. He can be in a crate or the pen in the bedroom to start with, so that gradually you can move that further out of the room and you end up with a really confident puppy who can be left alone. The alternative is to leave him crying all night. Now, after a while, several nights or even weeks, he may stop crying if you're determined, but that doesn't do any good for his relationship with you and his overall confidence. And what would you do with a human baby after all? Nowadays, you don't leave the baby to cry forever, so why do it with puppy? But there are ways, okay? And there again, that is something I would do specifically one-to-one with somebody. The next thing is how you're going to get to motivate the puppy. So really, when you want the puppy to come to you, or to, I don't know, to come away from something, well, specifically come away from something, or exchange something, or anything like that, if you can, I would say, try to rule the word no out of your vocabulary. That's very difficult. But what we need to be looking at is what you do want him to do. And it really is important that you carry food with you all the time. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to be feeding your adult dog all the time, every time you ask it to do anything. But at the moment, whenever you ask the puppy to do something, or you wanted to show it to do something, or whether it's behaving in a way you love, maybe it's been charging around the place and settles, or maybe it's been jumping all over you and it stops jumping, you need to reinforce that moment. So you need to have food on you, okay? So the other thing is going on to the yes and not no, trying to avoid a loud no. So your puppy is about to chew something. If you yell no and make it jump out of its skin, how are you sure that puppy knows actually what you're saying no about? It may be just because he's standing in a certain place. No, it may not actually know why you're saying no. It's a whole lot better to use the thing like, not that, no, come and do this instead. So all the time you're going to show the puppy what you do want it to do rather than what you don't want to do. I know it's easier said than done, but again, we would go into specifics with your own puppy. Right, now the next thing is to look at what you're feeding puppy on, because good food actually goes towards what you might call good behaviour. Food with too many E numbers and additives and the wrong balance and rubbish can cause not only overexcitement, but also it's going to make your toilet training a lot more difficult. So the better the food, it stands to reason, the better the wastage. So there's dog food directories and so on online, and again, if I did a one-to-one, we'd discuss what would be the best way to feed. Now the other thing is how you feed. Food doesn't always have to be in a bowl. Now your little puppy is going to have loads of energy in between sleeping, and just feeding the food in a bowl and leaving it down all the time doesn't help you at all. So there are other ways you can feed him so that it makes him tired, it makes him feel content. He can work for his food, he can play to get his food. So we would look at that as well, various specific ways that would suit you and your puppy to feed him. One thing I would say though is practice sometimes when you feed him a treat or something, doing it over his head from behind, because dogs don't like that. Now if you do that sometimes with nice food in your hand, you may actually help him to be used to big hands coming over him. So as I say, it's something that dogs instinctively don't like, and then people you meet when you're out and children, they will do this, they will put the hand over the top of the dog. The next one on my list is toilet training, but we're going to do that separately because that is what really people find is the number one challenge, and a lot of the time they just do it wrong. One of the things we've covered already is they give the dog too much space, and yes, we'll go into that detail next time. So leading on to that a little bit is adjusting the environment to the puppy. It's no good really getting furious with him when he steals your slippers or even chases your floppy pajama trousers or whatever he does that puppies do. It's only a puppy and it's not forever. So you need to adjust the environment. Excuse me. Lift all the things anything that he's going to damage or is going to harm him. And also you don't need to wear pajamas with floppy trousers, and you don't need to wear slippers with cats' heads on them. You can be fairly sensible with this. But as far as chewing is concerned, there is another element to this, and that is he's probably teething. So you can think of it as pain relief. So he needs to chew. So you need to first of all show him what he can do instead of what you don't want him to do, and then give him plenty of things to do it with, which again we'd talk about. The next thing which you obviously get with a puppy, as we all know, is nipping. And that's rather along the same lines. If you make a big deal of it and squeal and scream and the rest of it, that will just stir the puppy up. I would say we'd look at what his siblings do. It would be a very gentle squeal, and well, I'm not playing with you anymore. And we'd look at that, though, as well. That leads really on to wild behaviour. Puppies have zoomies, don't they? They have the zoomies usually in the evening, probably because that's when all the pressure and excitement's built up, and often it's fairly soon after a meal, which probably is because they have a rush of energy then. And so they run off steam and then they collapse. So that's all totally expected. The next thing is when people come to your house. Now, you don't want puppy to be intimidated by people. Now, what mostly people do, they're so thrilled to see a puppy, they may even pick it up. Now, that is a bad start. I think if you can train your friends to come in calmly, if they say hello to the puppy, to lower themselves, maybe kneel down and let puppy come over to them. Be careful with big hands over the top and being too excited. And let the puppy know that people coming to the house is really no big deal. It's probably a good idea also to not give the puppy access to the door when they come in, so that it sort of keeps him safe. We'd look at that as well on a one-to-one basis, depending on your own environment and your own puppy. Now, very important is being able to get his attention and him coming to you when you call him, because that will save him from so much trouble. I mean, you see him about to do something which is going to harm him, say, oh, I don't know, there's an electric wire cable or something. Now, instead of going, no, you could just call him. And now if you immediately looked around and said, oh, you've called me, good, because he knows when he gets to you, he's going to get something. Then you've got him on remote control. And that is really important. There are lots of ways to do this, which again, we'd look at in detail. Then that brings us really at the end of it almost to training itself. And there's other things I think are more important, but training is useful sometimes if your dog, certainly getting it to come to you is training. A lot of people like to train their puppy to sit. Mainly it's quite good because he can't do some of the things which you don't want him to do and sit at the same time. Down is a useful one. The way to do it, there's two main ways we do it, with luring the puppy and again using reward and using a clicker. Now, if somebody wanted a one-to-one and clicker looked a good idea, then we would go into that. Then one other thing to do with hands and touching, it's a good idea to groom and touch your puppy every day to start with, so that he's used to being fiddled with and handled. The last thing, which is more training, is what you're going to do about walking. Now this, first of all, depends on getting good equipment. I would say right from the start, although you might need to have a collar when you take him out to have a name tag on, I would never clip a lead to his collar. That little neck is a fragile thing, and it's got lots of valuable glands and things, and their neck really is as sensitive as our own necks. And if he pulls and it hurts him, that's not a good idea. A harness is a much of a thing, and we would discuss also the best sort of harness for the puppy. And then the next thing is teaching him to walk nicely. Now that is best done to begin with, walking around near you with no lead at all. And it's surprisingly easy. I will show you how. And then when he's got the hang of that, you just pop a lead on his harness and carry on as you are, and you keep doing it. So what you're doing is teaching him that walking near you, like there's no lead at all, is nice, it's good, it's the best thing to be. There's no corrections, no pulling him back. There's just reinforcement for doing it nicely. And that does depend a little bit on the various other things, which, like not having him too excited at the time and so on. But we look at those things. Okay, so puppy parenting is about two things. Well, it's first of all about making life as good as it can be now. It's about preempting future problems, which can be very big problems. Yes, and it's about why, on all the little things, why we're doing it. And then the last most important one is how we do it. So I've just touched on how. The how, we could go into a lot more detail one-to-one on your own specific dog. Okay, enjoy your puppy. Bye bye.